Welcome to Mark My Words, a show that searches for the fork in the road in life, the place where the turning point in the journey of entrepreneurship and life can be found. Let's meet each other at the crossroads on Mark My Words. This episode is sponsored by GrowX Labs. Let's be real, leading a business is lonely. When the big decisions land on your desk, who do you actually talk to? That's where GrowX Labs comes in. Their executive decision support gives founders and execs direct access to a strategic sounding board. Someone who's been in the trenches and knows how to cut through the noise. Whether it's team tension, high stakes moves, or just needing to talk it out, GrowX helps you move forward with clarity and confidence. Head to growxlabs.com/mark. That's GRWX labs.com/mark and book your discovery call. When I think about resilience and stories of resilience, obviously the first person that I think of is myself. I've been through a lot. I really had to climb through a lot of ups and downs in order to make it to where I am today. It was not an easy path, and I kind of understand. I should take the word kind of out because I feel like I do understand what it means to be resilient and really work hard and to just work through the blue collar life and into, I guess, the white collar life. I mean, I have a very cushy day job and I'm doing this podcast and I've been able to make a lot of my own dreams come true. Well, today on Mark My Words, I'm your host, Mark Schmidt, by the way. I have a guest who has a really, like, kind of a, certainly not similar, but I think similar in spirit. They hail from New Zealand and they are the founder of New Zealand Property Buyers Ltd. And it's basically, and I'll certainly let Hadley fill in the blanks because I am not the expert here, but he has helped over 100 clients purchase properties and turn them into passive income. And now they manage 160 plus properties while still being able to sleep and maintain a healthy work-life balance, which I feel is the 21st century dream. And we're not talking about, not to minimize the idea of uploading stock footage or whatever to make passive income or the oodles of other ways you can make passive income. There's so many out there, but certainly I think Hadley is doing something that's a little more traditional, and they have a fascinating story, and they have been involved in agriculture, and they actually had very blue collar job of driving road trains, working in mines in Western Australia, and certainly doing things way more blue collar than I ever did. I think I did something with asbestos for a few hours. Some of that got into my lungs, and I said, well, I'm not doing that. So I'm guessing Hadley held out a bit longer doing that kind of uh, very blue collar work than I did. Um, but definitely similar in spirit. Hadley Nightingale, welcome to Mark My Words. How you doing today?
Yeah, very well, Mark. Thanks for having me. And like we were saying earlier, I'm a day ahead of you. So the day you got ahead or the night you got ahead's a good one.
Absolutely. I love talking to people from the other side of the world. And apologies to anybody I've had on this show before. I know I've had a few Australians, but I don't think I've had anybody from New Zealand. And I am always fascinated with the day ahead thing, even though at the end of the day, it's just life, you're just ahead a few hours. Life is life and the world just keeps going around, but you're already into Wednesday. I guess it's Tuesday evening and you're into Wednesday. So I don't know where I'm going with that, but welcome to Mark My Words and thank you for starting your day with me. I'm not usually recording episodes quite this late on this end, but you have a really amazing story that I can't wait to learn more about. I know just some of the notes and little bites of information that I have are interesting enough. So let me just get started with you today are involved with properties. You started out in agriculture. Uh, what were you dreaming about when you were growing up? Like, what did you have in mind about future Hadley and what he might be doing?
Awesome question. Yeah, I suppose future Hadley, looking back, primary school or elementary school, I suppose you call it in the States, was always a thing of like, I want to go and work for someone. I don't want to go and work for someone else. I always wanted to work for myself. And then I suppose as time went on and more in the school system, that it was like, oh, look, I might want to go and work in as a police officer or law enforcement. That was sort of the angle that I went down. And then uh, I suppose it's probably the rebellious part of me was came out where my mum was like, you should become a police officer, you should become a police officer, you should become a police officer. Then what happened was the rebellious part of me came out and went, you know what, I'm going to go farming. And so it was the complete sort of 180 from and I don't know whether it was specifically in spite of me being a semi-rebellious 16-year-old at the time, but that's where sort of young Hadley saw the future, and then that's sort of the transition into the agriculture side of things.
So, what did that type of work, especially doing something like that so young, and I guess a lot of people who get involved with agriculture and farming, they need young bodies, but what did that teach you, and how do you think that kind of paved the way for the future as you evolved and prepped your way into eventually entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I suppose from a young age, I always had the entrepreneurial spirit that sat there and went, there's something more here than just going to work Monday to Friday. The agriculture side of things was really a big thing for me because it was like long hours, hands-on labor, working sort of 14 days straight and then having a couple of days off. So it was really the long hours, the grind, minimal sleep, and that started for me at sort of the age of 15. As soon as I could drive, I had jobs that either started early morning before school, and ironically, before school at 15, I was stacking shelves for the milk or the dairy in the supermarkets, and then as I got a bit older, and then in the school holidays, I was going and working on people's farms to make some money, get some experience, and then get myself to an age before I could actually leave school. So I suppose that started building the work ethic, and that's really been the thing. And my philosophy was that the harder I worked, the more hours that I worked, because that's what my parents modeled to me is like just go out and start working. And the only way you're going to get ahead is to get a good job, work longer hours, make some money, put some away, and then eventually you'll be right. So it started at sort of that 16, 17 years of age with that sort of things and when I left school.
Well, I'm certainly glad that the idea of entrepreneurship and all that hard work kind of clicked with you a lot earlier than it ever did with me, because I had always been like a very like resourceful person. I've always prided myself in being a hard worker and just always wanted to really like prove myself. But my way of thinking of accomplishing that was by trying to climb the corporate ladder and do work that was like a bit more visible. Like, wow, look at what they're doing. Because I spent a lot of my formative years kind of being brushed off to the side and dismissed and maybe underestimated. I think for me, it came from a different place, and I actually didn't learn until I got much older that you can find fulfillment just through doing your own work and working for yourself. And I'm guessing that that was something that you learned from a young age based on what you're saying, is that you're like, wow, this brings me a sense of fulfillment the way that I'm, being my own advocate and working for myself. Do you think that's accurate?
I think that was the goal. So once I went down the agriculture route, I ended up working for other people for sort of 10 to 12 years. So it wasn't until I got to 33 that I started my own company properly and out by myself. Prior to that, I was still working for other people and doing sort of uh, the real estate stuff on the side. But I climbed the corporate ladder. I gave that a go, and then just found that it wasn't as fulfilling as. And I don't make a particularly good employee either, because I'm always looking for improvement and seeing what else I can do. So obviously, yeah, that wasn't well received. Wasn't well received, and I pretty quickly worked out that the way to climb the corporate ladder is just to be quiet and climb. And then who can you suck up to get a higher paying job? So which wasn't for me, and at the end of the day, there was always that yearning to go and do it, but it was more so the fact of, I suppose, the confidence, because I was going to get into real estate in my early 20s, and I got talked out of it by a couple of people who said, "Hey, look, don't do that. You'll never make any money. It's commission only. You probably won't survive if you don't sell anything. You'll never you won't get ahead." And I look back now and go, if I was in my early 20s and someone offered me a commission only job now, what a great opportunity. You've got to learn to sell blooming quickly, but boy, you can get yourself ahead rather than being restricted to, hey, I'm at the time making $15 an hour, and then trying to go and work, 100 hours a week to make $1,500, as opposed to going and making some sales, which would have been a whole lot less hours than the 100, a whole lot less wear and tear on the body, but also would have been picking up probably a more vital skill set at the time too.
And that's really interesting that you had the opportunity to do all this. And it's amazing what we learn as we get older and evolve. Because I know for me, I probably could have done this and probably could have gone off in a lot of entrepreneurial directions. Like just growing up, I don't know how I can define that, but especially when I look back on myself, I see that, especially after meeting so many people like you, I see that the whole, like, I have a lot of the traits that entrepreneurs seem to have. I just didn't really have like a real passion, or at least a passion that I felt confident enough to put out there or put myself behind. And it it was a long journey for me, because I wound up eventually getting encouraged to do exactly what I'm doing now. I mean, everything happens for a reason, and we go through a lot of the stuff we do for a reason. I'm sure there was a reason that you had, gone through all those phases of just blue collar and hard work. just because you have so many like amazing things to say about it and just so many like just good thoughts on taking accountability for yourself, which you wrote so much about on Podmatch, which I can't wait to touch on. I mean, is is this all stuff that you just learned over the course of time? Like, I have to take accountability for myself. Only you can pave your own way and your own success. Like, that's a really great attitude that a lot of people like never learn. So that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, I mean that side of it has really happened in the last sort of 6 or 7 years. I went through a quite a nasty, and it was still ongoing, separation with my ex partner in my early 30s, and I've got a daughter with her, and I mean she's taught me a lot, or that the whole situation's taught me a lot, about things happen in your life, and you've got two options on what you do with them. You can either sit there and go, "Poor me, why's this happened to me?" And that happened to me for a long, long time. You'd sit there and you'd get a letter from a lawyer, you'd get a letter from the tax department about something, you'd get a letter from someone else about either your kid or some money or something like that, and your heart would just sink, and you go, what? Why me? Why's this happened to me? Surely I can't just be like everyone else who doesn't have these same challenges. But the thing with it, and the thing that I've learned from it is that the only person that got you there is you, and the only person that can get you back out of there is you. Wishing or hoping isn't going to get you anywhere. You're just going to end up in exactly the same spot as what you are. And you've got decisions in life, so you can either accept what you've got, or you can go, right. I've got myself here. Things need to change. Uh, as I think Jim Rohn said, for things to get better, I've got to get better. And for things to change, I've got to change. So if you want the same thing, keep on doing the same things, or if you want things to get better, you've just got to go down that path. And it's a lot of it's easier said than done at the end of the day. But if you just take responsibility for where you are, your actions, if things aren't going your way, it's a case of, well, what do I need to change in my day to day to make that better? What attitudes do I need to change? What actions do I need to take to change things for me?
And a lot of people wind up getting caught up in their own patterns. And I'm sure neither one of us are here to break down the psychology of that, but it's easy to get into patterns and not really see for yourself, what needs to be fixed or what needs to be taken into account on your own accord. Um, I am going to do a really awkward transition segue because I want to ask you what inspired you to found New Zealand Property Buyers.
Yeah, the inspiration came there from being out in the or getting some training around real estate, and then going out to the market and seeing people that didn't go through the same training as what I did struggle to purchase property, pay too much for property, and it just sort of irritated me that there's people that the buyers have no representation. And so what we were seeing was is that, and it still happens now, the buyers agency isn't a big thing in New Zealand, where people go out, they go up against real estate agents every week, they tell them all their secrets, in terms of budget, what they're looking to do with the property, and the real estate agent goes, "Cool, thank you. I'm going to keep that up my sleeve to use against you at a later stage." The other thing with that too is that I had some friends that we were working with that were based in the UK that did a similar thing, and also I was finding too many deals to do myself. There's obviously only so much that you can do. So that was then a case of, right, cool. How do I make this something that I do full time, and how do I monetize this as well so I can keep doing it without having to go back to a job. So that was really the starting point, I suppose, as to the inspiration behind it.
And when even people like me read about things like, you know, turning uh, property purchases into passive income, that just kind of sounds like something that, I purchased it, I can put my hands behind my head and boom, I make money. But my guess is it takes a little more elbow grease and work than people might expect.
Yeah, I mean, if you're doing it yourself, then that's definitely not the way that it goes. In terms of the company that we run now, is it's very much like that, where we do everything for our clients from end to end. Uh, and it can be like that provided you've got the right team behind you. But you haven't got the right team, it can also be a disaster. So picking the people that you're working with becomes extremely important. Getting the right team behind you is extremely important. And it's never 100% passive. There's always some elements there of actually having to be active with what you're doing. Because if you turn everything over to someone else, you can also find yourself in a situation where things go astray when you take your eyes off things completely.
And I just want to note that I've learned the hard way about making passive income because even something that you put into ChatGPT and you ask it and you follow through on it, it takes work. So don't be fooled by the idea of passive income. All passive income still takes work. And I know that that's a bit related but unrelated, but I feel like that's a lesson I've learned just over the course of time. And I felt it was important to note that because it's a lot harder than it sounds. But one thing that I want to ask you while I'm thinking about it is you talked about building the right kind of team. And I know there's a lot of solopreneurs out there who may be thinking about whether they should build a team and how can they build a team. And I'd love to know, especially somebody who just seems so self assured and resourceful, how did you go about building that team that you feel so confident in and can, give you the success that you want?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely learned the hard way on that as well in terms of getting started. But the team side of things becomes the important part as you want to grow. And if you're the solopreneur, which is great, but you find that you're stuck and you go away for a week and that your revenue stops because your emails back up, your phone calls back up, everything gets there, and then you come back from the week's holiday and you go, well, I haven't rested at all. And so that first step and those first hires become the extremely important part to to get right. And the first hire that I made that I didn't get right was I hired an EA, but I didn't train her and I didn't give her the right the right tools and the right method to go in and get started. I just at the time just expected, like, right, you're an EA, surely you can do EA stuff. And so that was really the foundation of it, was those processes and systems that we had to get in place. But before we started building the rest of the team. And I mean, I think that's probably a struggle that most solopreneurs have. And I mean, if your listeners want a copy of my EA playbook, just to give you an idea of how to start, what tasks to give them, then they can reach out to me on Instagram and just message me, Mark, or DM me, Mark, and I'll get that across to them for their reference.
So, how do you overcome mistakes? Or even just obstacles? Because I have to imagine, especially when you're dealing with properties and real estate, there are going to be things that come up. And I know for me, just with what I do, especially dealing with things that are a bit unpredictable sometimes, I will come across situations that I didn't expect, and it feels like a gut punch sometimes. And they're all lessons and they're all things that will help you in the future. But at the time, in the moment, it's like, oh my gosh, how do you get yourself and maybe even the team to move forward and move past uh, mistakes or maybe things you haven't come across before?
I think most mistakes are opportunities. So one of the big things that we always say to the team is that we've either got a process problem or a people problem. The process problem's the first one, and if there's a process problem, that's my problem. If we've got a process in place and someone hasn't followed it, it then becomes a thing of have we trained them on that, and then if we have trained them on that, then we've got a people problem, and we work with that person to either get them trained up properly for a second time, or if they still can't perform the task, then we transition them away. And in terms of problems that pop up as the business grows, as your experience grows, like my problems that I face today and deal with today, if I'd had them 3 or 4 years ago, my head would have exploded and I just wouldn't have known how to deal with them. And my big problems back then are minor sort of things that happen, and we deal with them and move on. But I think that's the thing. If we make a mistake, if we have a problem that we haven't come across, is like, how do we put a process in place? How do we put a system in place to then combat that for the next time around? So that there's no panic, there's no people aren't calling people going, hey, how do I fix this? And I think that's the other thing for people that are just starting out in business, or people that have got a team of 2 or 3, that the owners have got everything in their head. That it means that their phone just rings all the time. You're getting Slack messages all the time saying, hey, how do I do this? How do I do this? What happens here? Hey, we can't deliver on this because we don't know what to do. And it's becoming easier and easier with AI to go and record something and then put it through the AI. The AI spits out your operating procedure for you, and then that gives your team a base to follow. But I think that's the thing is that you go to find the problem, the solution's this, let's process and map it out, and then train the team to that process.
So you talk a lot about process and system, which is important in any business. Did do you think your experiences in agriculture and just in the blue collar world, do you think that that gave you like a good foundation for understanding how to create your own systems?
No, not at all. I was the worst. I was horrific at it. And I had someone say to me a few years ago, the better systems you've got, the better people you will have. The better systems, the better people that you'll have. Because if you've got rubbish systems, you won't attract amazing talent. But when you've got the systems there and the people can plug into them, then all they've got to do is worry about getting on with what they're doing. And so no, I was terrible at it. It's why the first, like I said, EA that I had, poor lady, just would have been there scratching her head, going, what am I supposed to do? Because in my mind, I'm like, right, you're an EA, go and do EA things, or like I've figured this out. Surely, why can't you? And then it took me a long time to realize that not everyone's wired the same as what I am. If they were, everyone would have started their own business. And that you need to give people guardrails or railway tracks to run on, to go, right, this is the direction that you're going, and this is what you need to do. If you get to the edge of the guardrails, you either bounce off them or pass it to someone else. And without that, people just go and stray, and then you end up herding cats.
Well, let's not hurt anybody. Uh, how about I give you an opportunity to educate me, because a big part of doing this show is that I don't know anything. I never come into an episode and assume I know anything. This is definitely a topic and a profession that I don't know much about. I've at least had a few related episodes that have at least planted the seed, and I don't take the seed and grow with it. But a lot of people talk about getting involved in real estate, and especially in the way you're doing it, and it can be pretty lucrative. So why don't you just kind of educate me on like just your process and how you help people to accomplish their goal of passive income and just kind of getting the ball rolling?
Yeah, I think that the key thing is strategy. Strategy first. That's the most important thing. Most people go and jump onto realestate.co.nz, which is our equivalent of Zillow or realtor.com, and they'll sit there and they'll start looking at houses. And the thing you've got to do is just stop looking at houses and take a few steps back and go, right, strategically, what is it that I'm wanting to achieve? Am I looking to trade? Am I looking to buy and hold? Am I looking to have student accommodation, social housing, or Section 8 housing? What strategy am I looking to execute on? Then go to look at the areas that strategy works in, because not every area suits every strategy. And then houses being the last thing that you look at. So instead of, in New Zealand's case, instead of going and looking at 40,000 different listings, go and find the suburbs or the streets that suit exactly what you're doing, or the property type that suits what you're doing, and then execute on the strategy in the area part first before the houses. So that's sort of number one with that. And then the second thing is or the biggest issue with property is everyone's got an opinion on it because everyone's lived in a house before. And people will go and they'll go to a barbecue and the uncle will have a few beers and tell them about the house that they bought 15 years ago in this great place and how fantastic it is. And then you say, oh, I'm about to go and buy a house here. And their opinion is, oh no, never buy a house in that particular street or that area because my mate lived there 10 years ago and the gangs were in the street and it was the worst street, ever, so don't do it. And most people just go and take the uncle's advice. But if they were to have a legal problem or a tax problem, they go and talk to a lawyer and an accountant about, hey, how do I sort this specific issue? Not go and talk to their uncle. Or most people wouldn't anyway, unless their uncle was the lawyer. But it seems to be when it comes to property, everybody's got an opinion. Most of them are uneducated opinions, even though the family members are the ones that want to see you safe. They don't necessarily want to see you surpass where they are at the same time. And so it's about working at a strategy, but also getting some advice too from people that are in the game as to places to buy. And that's not necessarily saying, come and talk to me. That's, if you're doing this yourself, go and talk to your property manager, go and talk to your maintenance teams, go and talk to people that live in the particular area. And I think the other thing to keep in mind too is that just because you wouldn't live in a particular area doesn't mean other people don't. So a house in an area or in a part of town where you wouldn't live isn't necessarily a bad house or a bad investment just because you wouldn't live there. There are a number of people that live down the same street that rent properties in the neighboring area that would also rent the same property. So it's about looking at through a logical lens as opposed to the emotional side of things.
So, would it be good for a beginner to invest in something that maybe would just kind of like teach them the process, or just to go with something that maybe might be in like a not as good part of town in order to learn? Like, what's the best way for somebody like me, this host, who doesn't know anything about anything? Like, what would be the best way for me to learn if I said, Hadley, I want to do this?
Yeah, in terms of like from your own practical experience, one of the key things to look at in terms of suburb metrics is that you want to be as close to the median as possible. You want to stay away from the bottom 20% of any suburb. You want to stay away from the top 20% of the suburb, because you get super low socioeconomic, which gets hard to sell in tough times. You get the high-end properties, which are also hard to sell. People get very picky. But the closer you can get to the middle of the bell curve, the better off you are, because you've got the most buyers that are there in a particular market. So if you can get it just to the lower side of the bell curve and then do some minor renovations, do it up to get to the median or just above median, you're right. But you don't want to be pushing the upper end into high end. The other thing is too that people get carried away with sexy property, for lack of a better term. They watch the renovation shows on TV and see these guys smash a renovation out in 6 weeks, and it costs them 130 grand, and they've made 300 out of it. And that's the part where it gets dangerous for people, is I always say, like, just go and buy a single family home for your first one, that you can just do some paint and some carpet in, keep it as simple as possible and as boring as possible. So that if something doesn't quite go right, you've got a number of exits to get off. You're not, and it's close to that median. So if you have to sell it, you can. Rather than getting something that's super investment centric, or especially if it's your first deal, things always take longer and cost more than what you think. It doesn't matter how long you've been doing this for. You can have a pretty good guess, and then, like, for the other day, we were halfway through renovating a house, found out that a chimney that should have been blocked off wasn't blocked off, and we had water coming down the chimney through the wall, after the cap fell off, and then found that there was a whole lot of rotting wood behind that particular wall. Now, this house I wouldn't buy for a client because there's way too much happening in it. But for me personally, it's okay because of experience level. So start with simple and boring, and then if you want to go sexy later on down the track once you've got the runs on the board and the budget to do it. But it's not the starting place.
Do you ever run into properties that actually cause you a problem? Like, I don't know, you don't have to, certainly don't have to talk about legal or anything, but just maybe with your clients or in any other area? Because there's a lot of properties out there that need a lot of love.
Yeah. And I think that's the key with the due diligence up, in the front end of things. And, like, you've got to be checking with the council that all the council files are, and I don't know exactly how it works in the States. So from, like, a New Zealand perspective, you've got to be checking that all the council files are right. You've got to get a builder through to actually have a look at the structural integrity of a house. Once again, someone just telling you that it's a good buy, so go and buy it, you're going to, find yourself in a world of hurt. So it's that pre-purchase due diligence that becomes the really, really important part. We've had it where we've bought properties, we've been given quotes for stuff, and then we've found out that the quotes well under what they initially suspected. In that case, we've had a client that bought a property here, that we actually offered to buy. He wasn't happy. I actually offered to buy the property back off him at more than what he paid for it, because the upside in the deal was so good, but he just wasn't quite experienced enough to see that. So it does happen, but our due diligence is extremely robust in the front end, and I think that's probably the only place in the last 5 years where we've had to, going off of that type of thing.
Well, before I forget, there was one thing that I really wanted to ask you about, and that's the difference that your life and transitioning from something that was so blue collar and you had to work so hard, and I'm sure you're still working very hard, but now that you have your own business, has this affected the way you live life as far as like quality of life and just how you sort out work and personal and leisure? How has this benefited you on that end of the end of the spectrum? I can't even talk. Whew.
Yeah, in terms of that side of things, it makes it easier that, like, if my daughter's got stuff on, I can go to her school events, I can go to her assemblies and prize givings and that type of thing. So there's a lot of flexibility there with that. The leisure side of things, I'm getting better at, but need to get further, more better, for lack of a better term for it. So it gives you flexibility there, but at the same time, I still work longer hours now, or the same hours. Like, I was up at 3 o'clock this morning, working on some stuff, had an international call that we were doing. So it doesn't necessarily, the hours don't necessarily get less, but the reward becomes better. And so it'll be that if I get everything done and if I finish at lunchtime or just after lunch today, then so be it. Or if something comes up, like tomorrow, I've got a 6-month-old son as well, and he's got swimming in the morning. So I've got a chunk of time blocked out there to go and watch his swimming, that if I was at a normal 9 to 5 job, there's not a hope that would happen. So there's definitely the flexibility in there, but there's also the responsibility that comes with employing or having 13 people on the team, that you also need to to feed them as well, and have the revenue coming in to support that.
And speaking of your family, we actually have been able to get through a good chunk of this episode disruption free. Kudos to them for allowing us to have this awesome conversation here. I mean, this has been really educational for me. One thing before I ask you how everybody can find you and work with you, I should ask, um, I was gonna ask something and I brain farted. So why don't you go ahead? Like I said, I've been at this a lot today. Why don't you go ahead and tell us how we can find you and how people can work with you? And maybe that question will come back to me. Actually, I think it is, but go ahead.
Okay, cool. We'll do that part first. Yeah. So best way to get a hold of me is on Instagram at Hadley Nightingale. And then in terms of working with us, if you're looking to purchase in New Zealand, we've got our full end-to-end service there from start to finish. Internationally, we've also got a business coaching program that also ties real estate into that as well. So we can obviously do that internationally. So that's an option there too. For both of those options, once again, just DM me on Instagram and I can get you the details across for them. And then also, as I said earlier, anyone that wants our playbook for hiring an EA, if you just once again DM me Marc, and I'll get the EA playbook across to you as well through Instagram.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. That gave me plenty of time to absorb the question I wanted to ask because you've been through so much and you've overcome so much over the course of your life and even your career. And I know you mentioned that you had kind of kicked around going into real estate and then you kind of like backed off from it and then returned. And obviously you are where you are now. But are there any other like mistakes or regrets that you have from over the course of time that maybe you wish you'd done something differently or uh, done something else?
Probably not, because I wouldn't be where I am now. That's the you. I suppose it comes back to what we were talking about earlier. Is that you can sit there and you can wish that things were different and then you had a different path, and why wasn't life easier for me? Or you can look at it and go, right, I'm, my the relationship breakup that I had that's been nasty for the last 7 8 years. It hasn't been pleasant, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone in the world. But I wouldn't have the amazing daughter that I've got if I said I wish I'd never had the relationship. I wouldn't have had the growth over the last 7 years to be where we are today without that being the catalyst for the shift. So I suppose it's easy to sit there and go, I wish these things didn't happen in my life, but it comes down to how you look at it, how you approach it. Are you going to use it for something to propel yourself forward and go, hey, look, I can get better from this? Or sit in the victim mentality of, hey, poor me, I'm never going to get ahead. This doesn't work for me, et cetera, et cetera. And the pity parties are very, very easy to have. Don't worry, I still have them occasionally, and I have to snap myself back out of them and go, hey, right, just be grateful for where you are, what you've got, and where you've come. Because I think that can also be something that becomes really difficult too over time. Is that you get yourself to a position, and because you've been fighting to get better, to do more, you don't fully appreciate the path that you've been down, and you might not necessarily, well, for me anyway, I don't always appreciate what I've got and where I am, because it just becomes the norm. And then it's like, right, cool, how do we go again? And it's really about just grounding myself back and going, right, be appreciative for where you are, for what you've got, because there's a lot of people that aren't as fortunate as what I am. Um, and then at the same time, use that gratitude to keep yourself moving forward, and yeah, I suppose is the way to keep you in the present rather than falling back into victim.
I'm really glad that you said all that because these are the battles that I fight myself all the time. And you almost have to remind yourself, especially when you arrive at the place I have, and certainly the place that you have to remember that all those things that you went through, they made you who you are, and they helped you to get to where you are. Much like I think you alluded to, I know I lose sight of that a lot, and sometimes I don't really. I want to say I appreciate my life, but I also feel like there's a little part of me that doesn't, and that's probably just a very human experience. Because I think whether you're, just a gazillionaire who gets to do whatever they want, just fill in the blank. It doesn't even have to be about money. The point is, I think we all have those experiences, but I think you are a great example of keeping yourself in check. It sounds like you do a lot of this checks and balances with yourself, and it speaks to why you are where you are, and hopefully it speaks to at least a degree of why I have the life that I have. And I think attitudes like we have, not to, talk my own self up too much, but I think it goes a long way in getting you at least to where you want to go and where you want to be and the type of fulfillment you want in life. And yeah, that's a lot of what this show is about. So I appreciate you, Hadley, coming on Mark My Words and sharing sharing your wisdom and sharing your story. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's been great, Mark. Thanks for having me on. And I think it's a case of like the stuff that we've talked about. It's simple, but it's not necessarily easy.
Yeah.
Is the other thing with it. And so the theory is great. It's the putting it into practice that becomes the hard part. And as you say, there is definitely that human side of it too, where if life was perfect every day and you were happy every day, you were never miserable, and you were always grateful, without having to remind yourself of that, you probably wouldn't be human. So that just adds to the adventure of life.
Well, a big part of the point of why I wanted to do this show in the first place, and there's a lot of reasons, probably not near enough time to go into it, but one thing that I can speak of or speak to that I think is relevant to this episode is I want people to click on this episode, listen to your story, maybe even get a sense for mine, and say, that sounds like something that I can do, and I want to learn more about that, which is exactly why I wanted you to be on an episode. And that's something that I hope people walk away with. Even if they are an entrepreneur already, maybe they can walk away with that extra bit of inspiration. So, uh, we all need that, and that's kind of what's gotten me here is that kind of support, and hopefully inadvertently we're giving other people that support as well.
Let's hope so.
Well, Hadley, again, thank you very much for being on Mark My Words. This was fantastic and inspiring and educational. I am Mark Schmidt, your host. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you soon with another episode. Bye for now. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to go on a journey with me into entrepreneurship and life on Mark My Words. If you would like to learn more about me and the show, you can find me on LinkedIn at Mark Schmidt or connect with me on Instagram at Nimrod79. Video episodes of Mark My Words, as well as other content, can also be found on the Mark My Words YouTube page. Entrepreneurship can be quite the roller coaster ride. It can be a bit isolating and intimidating, but it doesn't have to be that way. Let's meet here next time at the Crossroads on another episode of Mark My Words.